This is the day that the Lord has made, and we are rejoicing and we're glad in it. We're going to look at our points that we didn't share with you on Sunday. Point number one, be in a place where we are under the rule of God, living under the rule of Jesus Christ. And living under the rule of Jesus Christ, because He is the one who's living through us, will allow us to fulfill the righteousness of God, which is merely two things: loving God with all that's within us and loving our neighbor as ourselves. Or, as Leviticus tells us in around chapter number 19, don't have a grudge and don't have hatred. There is residual animosity toward someone, built up ill will toward people that hinder us from treating people correctly. Whatever a man thinketh in his heart, remember this, so is he. And so, therefore, what we allow to ruminate in our thoughts begins to come out of our mouths. And we begin to tell people and communicate with people and identify people based upon what we think. We call them fools. We call them nincompoops. We call them people who are stupid. And Jesus is saying that we ought not to do that. We ought to refuse. Point number two, we ought to refuse displaying wrath and allowing anger to linger. Why? Because Jesus is saying that even with people, not only our brothers and our sisters in the household of faith, but also people outside, that when we come into a place where we have adversary that is confronting us, that we ought to agree quickly with them. We ought to agree quickly with them, or we'll find ourselves in prison. We can find ourselves in prison if we hold on to unresolved resentment in our minds, in our emotions, in our attitudes. And when we come to worship God collectively with people, because we're so busy looking at people, or according to the text, with people who are not in the household of faith, that we have animosity toward them, and we cannot operate as children of God. We cannot operate as peacemakers because we have things that we will not lay down, things that we will not allow to die, built up resentment, built up anger that we will not allow to die. And what happens is it puts us in a prison. It puts us in a place of custody. We are in a straitjacket. Quickly compose ourselves and resist foolish behavior and submit to the rule of Jesus Christ. What is foolish behavior? Being taught that we should love everybody, period, even our enemies, and then do not increase in knowledge, do not increase in walking in that truth. That's foolishness. And so, how many times have we heard, love your neighbor as yourself, even love your enemies? And then when the situation comes to test that word, instead of doing what God's word says, walking under His rule, walking under His mandate, walking out His righteousness, we do what we think we want to do. And at that place, we're foolish. We don't want to be the foolish people. The ability to keep our eyes off of people to lust after them. Specifically, he's talking to the men in the audience, and he's telling them that you have the responsibility to govern your eyes. Your eyes are not on their own little mission. Your eyes are merely a reflection of your inward desires and your inward unrestricted discipline to look at others and covet. This is the Decalogues all over again. This is the Ten Commandments all over again. Commandment number 7 and commandment number 10 are combined here because lusting promotes adultery. It was David who lusted after Bathsheba, and before you know it, here she is in his arms. Even though that was Uriah's wife, even though she was married to someone who was submitted to do war on the behalf of the king, on behalf of Israel. He didn't care about that because he allowed his eyes to dictate instead of his love with God. And it's really a symptom of being out of control, being not under the dominion of Christ at that moment, because you can't be under the dominion of God and still lusting and doing something that he told you not to do. And so when we have those moments that we recognize that our flesh is not dead at that particular time and that we have to resist the devil. Remember? Satan took Jesus up and said, all these kingdoms will I give you. If you just bow down, all these kingdoms and the glory thereof will I give you. If you just bow down, lust of the eye. Jesus said, away with you, Satan. My objective is only to submit to the authority of God. And so lusting for a person not only leads to sexual activity, but is a sexual act. When we look at a woman, and when we look at her and the look lasts longer than a second, lust can come in. So we all will see a beautiful woman and we all will notice her right off. Consequently, we have to use restraint and we have to use discipline to look and go. Look and go. Have your head, have our head, have our head, because lingering promotes lust. Say that with me. Lingering promotes lust. We can't allow ourselves to linger on the anatomy of, or the body, or the figure, or the eyes, or the face of someone, because we will find ourselves committing adultery with them in our hearts and coveting. That's the 10th commandment, coveting that which does not belong to us. Observation with sexual inclination is incompatible with God's kingdom. So if it's incompatible with God's kingdom, and we honor and we exhort his will over our will. Say it with me. I exhort, I honor, I esteem God's will over my will. The last point, commitment to fidelity within marriage is submission to Jesus' higher law of righteousness. There's always going to be someone that's pretty. There's always going to be someone that's put together. There's always going to be someone that tries to rival the attention of your wife or your husband. But when we are people who are committed to God's covenant, we recognize that faithfulness, fidelity within our marriage is worship unto the Lord. It is showing how we are living an exemplary lifestyle, that we are living according to a higher law, that our righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees. Remember, the Pharisees would give you a bill of divorcement for any reason. But Jesus said, in the beginning, it was not so.